With me in studio is SANCO and WC member Lucas Kagaza. Lucas, good morning and welcome to the studio this morning.
Morning, Loretta, yes, and morning to the viewers.
The situation in Hammanskral, the violence there. For the benefit of our viewers, can you just break it down for us, to say what exactly is happening in Hammanskral?
Now, what is happening in Hammanskral is that there was illegal occupant of council land. And the council then got an interdict to actually evict the people. And I think based on that, then the people prepared themselves to actually fight against that. And unfortunately, that became violent because the residents themselves were so prepared that they actually retaliated and actually killed 2 people in that situation. And it's a situation that is very much uncalled for.
And now, for SANCO's part, are you aware probably currently of the people? Have there been any arrests made? What is the developments of what has happened since yesterday?
There is confirmation that 5 people have been arrested by the police in terms of that violence. And I think that we have actually called upon provincial government to intervene because in our view as SANCO is that violence must never be instigated, whether it's driven by government or it's driven by community itself. Violence is violence, and I think we're condemning violence at all costs.
Now let's talk about SANCO there. SANCO is a movement that represents ordinary people, right? And, people where they live in accessing the services available in different government. And this is something that I feel SANCO is closely linked with. Where does SANCO stand in this thing that's happening in Hammanskral right now? What is SANCO's stand on this?
Look, our stand is very clear, is that firstly, we do think that the issue of violent confrontation, whether instituted by government or instituted by community, is something that must be stopped at all costs. And secondly, we are saying that there is nothing that prevents us from actually sitting down and talking before the issues turn violent. And I think that's what we are calling upon to say, let's sit down, let's talk as community leaders, let's talk as government, let's sit down and let's resolve the situation without resorting to violence.
And now that the violence has already occurred and the situation is quite volatile in Hammanskral, what's the way forward? What is SANCO's interjection or intervention program, rather, for the community in Hammanskral?
Look, at the moment, we've got our leadership on the ground to make sure that it calms the situation so that the community can actually, and we've also called upon the municipality to sit with the leadership so that we can so that this thing is resolved amicably, rather than actually because you have got a court order, then you must actually force it upon the people. And that's something that our leadership on the ground is working towards, to make sure that there's peaceful resolution of the issue until it is actually solved amicably.
Amicably, okay. Just one more question. Let's talk more on what SANCO does in situations, because in this particular season, there has been quite a lot of protests also in different areas apart from Hammanskral, and we've seen that there's a lot of violence and unhappy things. In terms of procedure, as you just mentioned, there's a way in doing things. Let's sit down and talk. That's easier said than done. But if I'm going to get, an evictions notice, I know that at a particular point I'm supposed to have left. So when then can you say, can the person now forcefully remove me? When is the right time to do that? How do you suppose as SANCO, people should be dealt with in such situations? Because this is not the first time such a thing happens, where people will be occupying spaces in a land that is actually not meant for that, illegally occupying the space, and have to be evacuated. And when that happens, it looks like a very sad case, But what can you say as SANCO? What can people learn from this? Can you just share us with the communities, people who are watching us right now?
Lerato, we have always been upfront to say that any process that you need to embark on, you must make sure that there is involvement, there's a buy-in of the community in that process. Because we cannot allow a situation where, because immediately you actually remove people violence, then it will be violence against violence. And we've always said at SANCO that we must be able to sit down with our communities and tell them that this is, and where there are legal means, and people are occupying illegally, the arrest, the courts are there for our justice system. We cannot, by any means, because we're a municipality and we say that we will actually instill justice by making sure that we actually forcefully remove people. Forceful removals is something of the past, and we can't encourage it as SANCO in any way that it must happen.
Just one more question for you there, Lucas. What then, how do we avoid getting there? For instance, how do a whole lot of people, which actually a community, end up occupying a place illegally? How does that happen? How can we avoid that from even happening to start with?
Now, in the first place, I think we said in the statement that we released that we do think that it's time that the economic freedom fighters also take responsibility of these things, because of insinuations that they always make, that they will actually violently oppose any violence or any force that comes to them, because those things inculcate violence in our communities. We condemn that. And secondly, we are saying that whenever, our constitution is very clear, public participation is entrenched in the Systems Act, is entrenched in our constitution, and therefore there must be public participation in any event where communities are going to be affected. That must be a system that must be followed, that at least all parties have been consulted, all parties have actually agreed upon, and there's a system that is agreed to make sure that people are removed from wherever they are actually sitting illegally or invading the land illegally. And we think that as SANCO, that must be process that must be followed, that there must be consultative processes, there must be agreements, there must be some common understanding. And if we cannot reach an understanding, therefore, we must then apply the law, not violence. And violence can't be the law. There is no law that is violence in South Africa.
Thank you very much. Because of time, we'll just have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us this morning. That was Lucas Qhakaza, the SANCO NWC member.